I'll be honest. For the longest time, I never really got classic Sonic. Wait, let me back up a bit. Sonic, referring to Sonic the Hedgehog, the video game series about running really fast and collecting golden rings, and classic Sonic, referring to the era in which the franchise was at peak critical acclaim and cultural relevance. Notably, before Sonic transitioned from 2D to 3D. So, to reiterate, I never used to really understand the appeal of classic Sonic, despite how obviously loved it was in its day. As you probably already know, Sonic the Hedgehog was a bona fide gaming icon and spearheaded the rise of Sega, Nintendo's only real challenger in the gaming market at the time.
Come on, just show me what you got. Going fast is cool, going slow is not.
But Sonic's heyday is decidedly over, and it's strange to me that while Nintendo's output from this era is held up as the golden standard, the legacy of classic Sonic is kind of a huge question mark. Why is it that people who didn't play these games in their original historical context often can't really get into them? Furthermore, why couldn't I? I've always loved Sonic. Were these supposedly classic games just a vapid gimmick with a marketable main character? Or do they truly deserve a spot on the pantheon of classic, important video games? Well, with those tantalizing questions left hanging in the air, let's actually talk about the game. The original Sonic the Hedgehog, or Sonic 1. So, Sonic 1 is outwardly a basic platformer. You run from one end of the environment to the other, jumping over obstacles, smashing up enemies, and collecting power-ups. What sets this game apart is obviously its speed. Sonic is fast. If uninterrupted, he can even run on walls and ceilings. See, Sonic had a little something most platformers at the time didn't. Slopes. Sorry, dynamic slopes. With advanced physics! No, physics in regard to classic Sonic are not just a buzzword or a minuscule enthusiast's detail. Physics make this game what it is. Sonic needs time to accelerate if he wants to actually go fast, and his ability to accelerate depends on his use of the terrain. Maintaining speed means reacting quickly to hazards. Sonic needs the speed to make it up slopes, and builds it rather quickly on the way down, even faster should he choose to roll. It sounds simple, but the effect is very pronounced in these games. Sonic's jump art can take on endless permutations depending on his momentum. A good example of classic Sonic's pinball-like physics can be seen in Spring Yard Zone's half-pipes, in which Sonic will launch off higher and higher the longer you let him roll. It's also worth mentioning how if Sonic falls a great distance, landing on an enemy will bounce him way higher than normal. The physics at the core of classic Sonic gameplay are extremely satisfying once you get to grips with them. When you manage to pull off a series of good plays without stopping, it looks and feels great, because you aren't just handed the speed, you have to earn it by a proper understanding of Sonic's controls and the environment. In fact, the initial concept of Sonic the Hedgehog was inspired by the feeling of getting really good at the first stage of Super Mario Bros. And blazing through it without skipping a beat, and it shows. Notice how I speak of how fun it is to be good at Sonic. Unfortunately, it is distinctly unfun to be bad at Sonic. Okay, let me rephrase that. Hell, I'm not even that good of a Sonic player. What's rough is the barrier to entry, or rather the barrier to basic competency. It's similar to how Street Fighter's no fun if you don't understand basic game concepts or aren't able to even input the move you want in order to make tactical decisions. Sure, you can just mash buttons and watch the pretty animations, but you're not going to be sold on the game. The main draw of Street Fighter is hidden away behind a skill barrier. Sonic is kind of the same way. Everything that makes Sonic's handling unique is also what makes it utterly unintuitive to a new player. Platformers are typically about overcoming careful and precise challenges, so their controls are usually as tight and responsive as possible. That way, even a novice player can at least feel comfortable moving their character. The sooner you understand the rules of a game, the sooner you can genuinely participate in it. Classic Sonic is just awkward to play for the first time. His slow acceleration feels unresponsive. His jump seems wild and unpredictable due to how much it depends on momentum and terrain. New players won't realize momentum alone will carry Sonic up ramps, and they'll try to jump to unexpected results. Given how forgiving Sonic's hit point system is, it's entirely possible to beat the first level without realizing the game is almost a physics sandbox and not just an incredibly jank conventional platformer. Classic Sonic's biggest strength is arguably flow, which is non-existent to a player who's failing basic jumps and constantly losing speed to walls or hazards. That's not to say Sonic needs to handle more like other platformers. It simply means that the player needs something to help them get over that initial hump. And that something just isn't there. At least, not anymore. Yes, I think Sonic's presentation is what must have carried players through their novice phase back in the day. I wasn't actually born yet in 1991, but while this game looks pretty decent now, it must have blown people's prehistoric socks off back then. It's important to realize that Sonic 1 released as something of a technical marvel. No one had ever seen speed like this on a console. These were unprecedented levels of panache here. Recently, Sega put out a little game called Sonic Mania, a brand new adventure devised by former fans to replicate the look and feel of the classic-era Sonic titles. Sonic Mania's director, Christian Whitehead, was asked during an interview, "What is it about Sonic that people love so much?" His answer?
I think the characters themselves are very endearing and very expressive. So like as a kid, it's very easy to gravitate towards that because Sonic is fun to watch. When I was playing, even just like losing rings, even when I was getting hurt, it looked fun because like rings were flying out everywhere. Like I didn't know what was going on. I was like, oh, this is cool.
That's it, right there. A person's mindset is crucial to their enjoyment of any media. If you actively want to like something, you're much more likely to. Sonic's effortless sense of spectacle made kids want to like Sonic because it looked amazing, which guided them through the rocky process of learning the ropes. Conversely, now that video games can output spectacle like this, classic Sonic has essentially lost one of its key components to time, the stepping stone to competent play. That said, I do want to take some time to praise Sonic 1's presentation. After all, 1991 or 2017, this is still some of the most iconic character, sound, and level design in gaming. Sonic doesn't exactly have a story per se, but the context of your adventure is very apparent. There's an internal logic to the universe. Your enemy is the game's sole human, destroying nature's beauty with harsh industrial technology, trapping the wildlife in robot bodies to do his devious bidding. You play as the one animal with the power to resist. When you smash a robot, the critter inside runs free. Of course, there's still a little bit of arbitrary gaminess here and there between the golden rings, item monitors, and whatever the hell this is. But I think the effort they put in to contextualize Sonic's adventure adds a lot and represents an inspired, creative effort. While the checkered dirt was devised to convey speed and the weird polygonal trees to replicate the period's cutting-edge 3D graphics, these elements contribute to a psychedelic visual style that is unmistakably Sonic the Hedgehog. Did I mention the music's great? Because it's pretty great. So, back to where we started. Does Sonic the Hedgehog deserve a spot in the pantheon next to timeless classics like Super Metroid? Well, not quite. Sonic 1 is a classic, but it's not timeless. I think a timeless game needs to meet two criteria. 1. It needs to be polished to near perfection so that it need not be great in spite of something. Sonic 1 is great in spite of the fact that the level design is wildly inconsistent, so that's off the table. And 2, while all art is a product of its time, it needs to be comprised of elements that won't age out. There's Sonic's accessibility problem again. None of this makes Sonic unimportant or even bad. Take GoldenEye 64 for instance. That game was a trailblazer in its day, basically inventing FPS multiplayer as we know it. Now, it's super antiquated, arguably obsolete, but it's still remembered and loved for what it contributed to gaming then. Put yourself in the right headspace and you might still enjoy it now. Classic, but not timeless. I'd put Sonic in the same category, though I do think it holds up better than that rather extreme example. Sonic the Hedgehog is still a rewarding, vibrant experience to this day. But the feeling of living through the Sonic zeitgeist as a little kid in the 90s, unfortunately isn't accessible via emulator. And that's okay. As a performance poet, I don't think there's anything wrong with creating a piece of art that only makes sense exactly when you made it. I'm glad I could tap into that time, if only for an hour or two, and get classic Sonic.